All right. No, this is a let's see. I want to see if this microphone's working. And there's like no indicator on it right now about whether it is or not. But anyway, we're doing no makeup Sunday here. So so apologies. Yeah. Yeah. It should be noted that if I did have shame about this, I wouldn't be doing it. But okay. So for today, and probably one of the most noteworthy things here is that this is probably like the third there's probably like this and maybe like 2 or 3 more readings from the cover to cover of the Parinama method, and I guess one of the things this is the last time I'm going to be doing this style of reading where I don't do any prep work, and I just come on and I read from it, where I'm having the experience of reading it just as, like, a person who reads it, and that kind of originally the intention was to kind of create I guess maybe like a record or director's commentary, because so many people had asked me like the initial response overall had been like, how did you do this? How did you create this? Like, where did this come from? And so I was like, well, I'll try to answer it by having like a you know like doing this director's cut. But what really happened was I wound up doing it and having this like full a first full sequential cycle of doing this practice and seeing what happened in my life. And as I'm learning more and more about this, I'm learning about honestly like the duty of care for somebody undertaking this work. And that, it's like, like one of the things I see is like people having kind of breakthroughs and immediately being like, I'm a teacher now, everyone needs to know this. And especially when it's kind of like a passive like grace like awakening, which happens where you just kind of like have an opening or you kind of like, yeah, like a breakthrough that is that like in the 13th chapter, I think I talk about a little bit as like a grace, like where it's just kind of you get a little beginner's taste. But one of the things about there, especially in the culture that we exist in, which is like very prone towards hierarchy without realizing it, like it's kind of like, oh, this is my purpose, and my purpose is to now be a teacher, instead of like the purpose possibly being, like it's very of the, you know, of adaptations and our indoctrination about like this is the model. It's very cultural, by the way, because in other cultures, like when you sort of step over the threshold of becoming a student, essentially, which is like when you have your first awakening, there's there's more of a tendency to be like seeking deeper inquiry and finding teachers. And and a lot of what's happening right now is like really within a model of consumerism, where you have people that are like, well, I've consumed a lot of like the stuff that's accessible and made accessible as like, in intentionally, which is, and the thing is like that the idea that's like, let's take this and become a teacher. It's kind of like the model of like yoga teachers, where people are suffering in like the construction of their life, where it's like corporate life, or just under under rigid conditions, and having a breakthrough. And because there's so much pressure about like livelihood in a very particular way, that it's like the first thing is like this practical thing of like, well, I could turn this into a livelihood, and it's not, there's no, yeah, yeah, I guess it's like it's not a blame or shame thing. I'm just speaking to the like actually this actually works for this. This works for this very well. I'm speaking to the more the notion that your work, like this idea. So let's just say that like I have to be a teacher kind of this just thing that's arising. It's like I've done, I had like a year, or I had a breakthrough, and then I was doing a lot of yoga and, like reading a lot for about a year, and now it's like time to teach. That I like, instead of that being kind of like blamey and finger pointy, I want to kind of take it from another angle, which is it's of the model where it's like you're always giving your power away. So instead of actually filling your cup and investing in yourself and investing in your process and your growth and the depth of your understanding. So instead of even it being like responsibility and duty of care, it's like the path of your own process would be nourished and nurtured and allowed to exist. Now, one of the reasons that obviously that, many folks are going to naturally be inclined to kind of be like, how do I turn this into a functional lifestyle, right? Because it's like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to, how am I going to pay my bills? Is pretty simple. And then even create a livelihood out of this is that there's like a rush to that, and it's not anyone's fault. It's not a fault. I'm gonna say I don't place blame on anyone for doing that, because it's just another layer of the system of adaptations that we're looking to shed. And the thing too is that, and this is something I've really struggled with, which is that it's like filling my own cup so what I'm giving is overflow. Like filling my own cup so I'm whole with myself, that I have my own power that is like in a direct experience with my power, instead of it needing to be relative to other people. Feeling my own love so that it's not constantly seeking to have somebody else validate my worth and validate and love me, to show me, like to experience love as being like, it's always has to be this thing that's like between like ourselves and something else. Whereas like there's this first love, the greatest love of all, as Whitney Houston says, the greatest love of all is the source of the love that you're bringing to the exchanges that you're bringing to love with others, with other beings. And this goes back to the cup runneth over. It's like, if our hubs, if our safety and security, if our emotional capacity, if our need for power and our sense of self and confidence and even identity, if we don't have those established, then love will be the hub that comes after, will be used to try to compensate, and it will weaken the strength of it and the capacity for it. So that's why we start at the first hub, which is like kind of the one that is like, it's like, oh, that's boring. And it's like, yeah, but that foundation is the one that makes the ones that come after it like absolutely breathtakingly extraordinary. So it's like when we work on the sense of security, when we work on our ability to be able to handle strong emotions, to be able to transmute them, to be able to deal in to deal in nuance and ambiguity without needing things to be like very easy to manage as being like black or white. We can handle the like spaciousness of really like big complicated things, where it's like we're not operating like this sort of justice system mentality, like good guy, bad guy, guilty, innocent, where it's like bad people, good people, that we're able to actually comprehend like larger models that incorporate greater data sets of incredible amounts of data contained in a life, incredible amounts of inputs contained in a life, that are things we've done that are terrible and things that we've done that are extraordinary. And that's contained in every life. Every life has like that balance. And so the seeking to try to like I'm not even going to say seeking to, like the capacity to handle that is related to emotional capacity. But anyway, so like the thing is like the cup runneth over. So in our process, that our investment in ourselves, I mean, like, when very common where it's like, how, the world is so, fucked up, how do I change it? It's like, well, if you don't understand how power works and embody that, how is like the expectation, like, how can we have the expectation that we like fix it in everyone else before ourselves? So our own embodiment of these principles is what changes the world. And the whole idea, like, that the only way you can validate changing the world is changing someone else's life. That's already a symptom of this. It's like, change your own life, elevate your own life, expand your own capacity, develop your own ability to have a absolutely overflowing cup, that you're not, that we're not seeking from other people, like, with a hunger. Like, it's the hunger, like, in what we need from other people because we're starving for it, versus, like, being full and like, really filled and, like, coming together to elevate ourselves, to experience greater capacity to grow. So to what extent we can do that, and no judgment if that's if that's happening, that's happening, but to just see it and realize, like, oh, that's a thing, that's an inside job. And of course, once again, back to nuance, there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of nuance to this. It has to do with accountability, taking responsibility for our actions, all, like, on and on and on and on. But the cup runneth over part is, like, relates to this section, as we're in the manifesting and creating section of chapter 12. And so when we're talking about, the different steps to actually bringing something into reality, when we've talked about, like, where we get the idea, how we crystallize it, we bring it in, how we begin to find the words to express it so that we can actually start to bring it into the world to connect with the people who will either, like, use what we're doing or help us build what we're doing. And then the execution part, which is really about just the engine of it, of showing up and the consistency and the drive, which is really commonly understood as kind of like a very, like, in some schools of thought, like, the central axis of manifestation, right? And then some are like, no, it's the mindset, and it's like, it's all of it. But one of the things with having a very strong third hub, which a lot of people who are very effective manifestors, I count myself in this category, are can just execute. And that's been one of the hardest things of this past year, is to actually soften this aspect of myself and not, and to actually like, seek to fuel it from its integrity versus fuel it from adaptations from other hubs. That's a whole other story. But one of the places that makes manifestation and creation sustainable and more rapid is making it fun and celebrating your wins. And this is something that, one of the things about, if we've gotten all this way down here, and we're like really executing, we're working hard, we've got plans, we've got, like, we're just, every day we're showing up, and it's like, it's just like we're on this, like, fiery third hub aspect of execution. One of the things that can, like, evaporate all of the joy, because there's a satisfaction that comes from it, but then ultimately it's not sustainable because it just sort of needs fuel. And one of the things I'll say is that from experiences of, like, making, really large amounts of money, is that it actually, like, that becomes a joyless repetition. And I'm sure maybe, many people will see this and know what this, like, relate to this, which is like, how is getting something that's supposed to be like, that I've aspired for or, like, wanted or thought was, like, absolutely unattainable, how is this drudgery? How is there, it's like, oh yeah, it's like stacking, it's like dollars in a bank account becomes very, like, growing number, like, a very, like, disembodied enterprise. So part of the thing about the sustainability is like really consciously um engaging in a practice especially if it doesn't come easy, of making something enjoyable. And this is an area, it's super common. I've talked about it in other readings, that is, for folks who are usually at like sort of like the director level in their career, if you're talking about a conventional career, who are like in leadership but have not really ascended to like a senior leadership capacity, is that they're not fun. They're really like, like they feel like they act the they're so focused on. Oh, this is really topical actually, because there's a couple of places where this has come up this week, with in meetings and stuff. It's it's not understanding that. And Second Hub has a lot of subconscious componentry to it, but it's not it's the thing is, like, the idea that it's like at work, it's just about, like, getting things done, and the people that are, like, really great executors wind up, like, and I mean by execute, like, making things happen. It's like, if you don't understand this point of, like, resonating with other people, being enjoyable to work with, that it's like that there's a lot of, like, sometimes I'll hear, like, I'm not getting invited to meetings, or my ideas are not being like, kind of heard, even though they're really great ideas. And it's like, well, because it's not really matching up with what the people that, like, with the team, like, ultimately how they wanna feel. So that's a whole other topic. So I'm gonna read this. So make it fun. So we're on page 303 if you're following along in the book. Boopity boop. Um, Make it fun. So fun makes lighter work of challenging tasks. Laughter is a tension release, and it allows people to feel greater ease as they work hard. Many years ago, I told a high-performing team of mine that if it hit a particularly ambitious goal, I'd throw a pizza party with a clown that makes balloon animals. The team did it, and I threw the party. Folks on the team still bring it up in conversations over a decade later, now longer than that. The clown was terrifying at the time. I was secretly nervous about how this stunt would reflect on me in the office, but nevertheless, I delivered, and our fun, wild team went on to exceed goal after goal. Yeah, this is actually something that, in me reading it, like, personally, my response to this is like a relearning, because one of the things about our adaptations, and even and so I'll speak to that. This was now like more than a decade ago, and it was written about, like, it would be in, like, like, articles and stuff, like, where, like, it would be brought up as this, like, kind of wild thing, because it was wild. It was a big team, and it was like, and I remember being like, I was really fun at this point in my career. I was really fun. It's very funny. And the team was, like, extraordinarily successful. And it was like that aspect of the joy that I kept infusing. I wasn't experiencing it, which was actually, like, worth mentioning, is that it was very fun for everybody who worked for me. And for me, it was like just a, like, torture chamber. That's a whole other topic. I don't even know if this microphone is working. Um, but, like, there's a lot of, like, the things with our adaptations and our beliefs, like, the limiting beliefs that we have, like, an analogy that I really love is the marionette. And it's like, with the adaptations, we're kind of like, well, my fear keeps me vigilant and keeps me competitive. My shame keeps me from making a fool of myself. Like, all of these things, like, all, like, the fact that I can't relax is like because I'm a high achiever. Like, all of these beliefs, like, there are these strings that make these things that do not serve us, make us hold on to them. Another, like, total message for me right now, because it relates to something in my personal life, is like, without realizing it, that, like, we actually, like, double side the coin, or we turn something that doesn't serve us into also being a virtue, so it's very hard to let go of. So it's like this marionette where we're like, "The strings are the thing that keeps me, I'm a marionette. Like, if I cut the strings, I'll just be a pile on the floor." Whereas the reality is these adaptations are actually limiting the range of movement. When you cut the strings, you find that you're animated, that you actually, like, as a puppet, it's like the force is coming from within you. And you cut off all these strings and you're all of a sudden like free to move in ways that are extraordinary, like, are just so above and beyond. And even the beliefs, like, one of the things about these, like, negative beliefs about, like, my vigilance keeps me safe, because it makes me not, like, do reckless stuff because I'm, sort of unreliable or whatever. It's like it's really impossible to let go of fear if you think it's actually this thing that's, like, really important for your life, because it's the same thing, and it's like the narrative that's piled on top of that. And having fun is one of those things that's kinda like, yeah, you're not it's like, "Be serious, get serious," and all this kinda stuff. And in my experience, with building teams, is the fun is like the thing that creates the emergent property of, like, the team doing things that are just so beyond what can be comprehended as possible. So it's like hitting a goal, it's like hitting a goal, you have all the, like, the do this, do that, do this. That kind of, like, blowing the goal out comes from, like, activating the joy in the group, where people are, like, loving doing the work because it's funny, loving it because it's like there's joy in it. So it makes it sustainable. The other thing is celebrating wins, and this was something that I really like, oh my gosh, I'm writing these things. I'll tell you, these are 2 things that I've done both very well and very poorly. So, that's another thing. It's like we can recognize something and be like, "Yeah, that totally works and it's important." And also I've done it very well, but then also being like, "Yeah, and I've also done it really badly." And celebrating wins is one of them. So in grind culture, we move to the next challenge before taking time to celebrate a win. This is a short-term strategy. The first few times you skip the celebration, it may feel productive, but the absence of joy eventually erodes the ability to remain motivated. Joy is part of surviving, sustaining, and maintaining. And this is, like, I really want to, like, underline and bold this because, one of the things in that I've seen in working in companies is I've watched, like, very high performing people burn out, and folks who were able to sort of like it's sort of an endurance game, and the people who kind of like kept their, there's one particular example that's coming to mind that's now from a long time ago, but I remember I had this team and people just were like just running themselves ragged to succeed in this team, and building these books of business and building these pipelines, and just, like, working so hard in this way that just was absolutely, like, they just couldn't sustain. So they'd leave. They'd go somewhere else, and they burn out. They wouldn't, they at the time, like, it would be sort of like, yeah, like, all these reasons, but it would be, like, total burnout. They couldn't sustain how hard the work was. And there'd be, like, people who were kinda just, like, cruising along in the background, doing a pretty good job, serviceable job, still, kinda like having fun on, like, just, like, really not, like, not destroying themselves, like, working hard enough, like, learning, doing well, like, just and, this is actually a principle if you're hearing this, like, there's a very good chance this resonates with you because this is so universal, and what they would do is, like, when the people left, they'd inherit all their deals. They'd inherit all the client lists because you have to give them to somebody. It's like they still need to be worked. So you'd get people who had been, absolutely like eviscerating themselves to succeed. And then when they would leave, the deals and these huge things that they hadn't been able to close because it would have taken more time, somebody gets them on the like 10-yard line and closes them. And this is kind of this principle of like L it's so it's one of those things where it's like if like, life isn't fair. This happens everywhere. I'm now I'm one very particular example comes to mind, but it's so like, if I imagine if you're listening to this, you can think of plenty of examples of people who've just outlasted because they've managed their energy more effectively, and then they wind up just, like, sort of collecting all the flowers for everything that came before them that was really hard. So, the one thing is you could be like, "Oh, you know what? That's because life isn't fair." Or you could realize, "Oh, it's a game I'm playing, and I'm not playing it the right way." To, like, really buy into the narrative of, like, this isn't fair, or to realize, yeah, like, why am I like, what adaptations do I have that are forcing me in my 3rd hub to feel like I have to just overcompensate and work so hard that I'm killing myself, Self-worth, 3rd hub stuff burns you out and then leaves other people collecting your gains. But also the grind, because when you're creating, it's so much work. It is so much work, and it's one of the things I felt a lot of kind of resistance around that I'm starting to come out of right now, is knowing how the mental and physical and energetic state that requires building and creating. And this is why going for, like, high vibe stuff, like Chris and T music, like Peachka music, like stuff that, like, gives you energy, like, gives you the feeling of, like, encouragement. Like, even, Chris and T music that's, like, that's all affirmation. The thing is that if you take affirmation, like, this kind of music that's like, "I'm great, I'm perfect, I'm this," at face value, and, you apply sort of this, like, kind of cognitive lens on it, you go, "Well, it's not totally true, everything isn't how it should be." Like, it's kinda like, shrinkage, where, like, what we're really trying to do is, like, it's using words to create an energetic feeling. Like, it's not using the words to be literal, it's trying to actually generate energy. Um, and I think that's, something that is, when it's not understood, it leads to this thing like be delusional, or even be dissociated or not realistic or even harmful. And when it's like, when you realize, like, no, I'm, like, using this to actually fuel a state in myself that's in the service of creating something that is like, transcends what's taking my energy away. Very important. Very important in this process, which is, like, continuing to create space and invest in creating your energy, invest in creating joy, invest in doing things that, like, bring happiness into you. Because, it's like, because terrible things that happen to people, it's interesting because, like, the remediation of this looks very similar to denial. So it's like, when it's like, "Well, I'm gonna be happy, and I'm going to," it looks exactly like people who are ignoring the suffering of others. So there can be this kind of, like, false sort of, like, "I can't do that," or like false directional. But it's like finding the joy in yourself, finding the energy, finding that access to the truth of what is real, and also the fact that the things that, like, bring us down and cause, like, feelings of depression and negativity, um, or just drain, that, like, to feel that to like, the thing about, like, where it's like, well, I don't, like, the thing with integrity and reconciling this, like, the thing of integrity, to feel like it's not, I'm out of my integrity if I'm happy right now, which can be true, which absolutely can be true. But in terms of, like, sustaining and the point of actually ultimately, like, transitioning to taking action, it's like, well, you can use anger. Anger is a place to get energy. It's like fracking, but it works. And it's like very combustible. But in terms of, like, a sustainable humanizing aspect, it's like really finding, like, joyful, sincere celebration that is actually, like, not, and this is, like, part of the thing that I continue to build this. So, okay, so second hub descending, we've got make it fun and celebrate your wins. So that's it for today, and, no makeup Sundays. So there's this. And here we go, page 303, and next we get into the first hub descending. But I would say like, larger concepts today are, like, filling your cup and really considering that as being the, like, the order of operations versus, like, that I fill my cup by making other people fulfilled and making a difference in the world and changing people. It's like, it's like when you're, like, pouring from something that isn't full and you're just emptying yourself more and more, that leads to, ultimately leads to resentment and drainage and burnout and all this kind of stuff. So this exercise and this parinoming of building into yourself, of being on your side, of doing things that actually, like, create, like, a greater capacity for loving yourself, a greater capacity for, like, finding deeper aspects and broader aspects of your identity and your confidence and, like, your feelings and being able to embody safety. The investment of that, the thing about, like, oh, well, that's selfish. It's like, it's absolutely not. And, I think when I went on my, journey in Asia for a year or so, I remember that the takeaway for me, the big takeaway was that I needed to put myself first, and it was so confronting. Like, that was what was coming up, which was, like, this idea that's like, no, you actually need to, like, fill yourself, and then you give to others, and then the reciprocation from that is what, like, is where you get even more. Like that the rotation of the wheel comes from actually that you're first going to be the source of fulfillment, then you're going to be, like, then what the overflow goes to others, and then their, like, reception gratitude winds up, like, returning the, like, in multiples, like, in gratitude. W Yeah, and, like, creating more fulfillment. So it winds up actually being sort of a sustainable model that actually you're also getting energy from outside yourself. So, okay. Yep, that's it. That's it. All right, thank you. I can't wait to see you next time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.